But first, the BBC and the licence fee. Hardly ever, it seems these days, out of the news. Should BBC Three be taken online only? Is the iPlayer really the cornerstone of the BBC's future? Are they really thinking of subscription as a way of financing the BBC? Well, and if not, why not? And should licence fee evasion be decriminalised? The BBC's Director of Strategy and Digital is James Purnell, and he joins us now. James, thanks very much for coming.
Hi, Steve.
Just to start at the end there, you're a former Labour Cabinet Minister with an eye on the needs of the most needy in our society. Is it really right in this day and age that people are criminalised and possibly even imprisoned for failing to pay the licence fee?
Well, I don't look at this as a politician. I'm not a politician anymore. I look at it through the views of the BBC and of its audiences. But we don't want anyone going to prison, and indeed people don't go to prison for not paying the licence fee. It's if they don't pay the fines involved with that, and it's very much a last resort. It's about 50 people a year, and normally, we're told, it's when the magistrate gets frustrated that someone is willfully not paying a whole range of fines, actually,
but wouldn't it be better, though, if it was a civil penalty, not a criminal offence?
So we've said there's a good opportunity to consider all of these issues in Charter Review. That's due in the next couple of years. There are a range of issues about the licence fee, such as, we said it could be, and we'd like it to be extended to people watching catch-up TV on the iPlayer, for example. So we think it should be looked at in that context. We do think it's actually not the government considering this or looking at this for now. It's an amendment in front of the deregulation bill next week. And
although two senior ministers have both indicated that they're quite keen to talk about it.
Yeah, but they've said that it should be looked at in Charter Review, and we agree with that. But just on the point about what it could mean, we just think it would be a huge risk to look at it now, because if you look at something like electricity or gas, they can stop people consuming their service. They do pre-metering. And the exam question for the BBC is, how can you make people pay for something that you can't stop them consuming? And just to finish the point, if we had the same kind of evasion rates as gas or electricity, that would be twice as high as what we do now. That could be £200 million, which would be a whole range of BBC services, nearly the whole cost of the World Service, for example.
So at the moment, the problem is you can't stop people consuming BBC services even if they haven't paid for them.
That's right. The question people have to answer is, how do you have a system which works as well as this one, has one of the lowest evasion rates in Europe, and which doesn't make it worse for poor people? Actually, you could have, under a civil system, a worse outcome, because actually you have to have either you had a low fee, in which case evasion would go up, low fine, in which case evasion would go up, or you'd have a very high fine. And in a civil system, there's no discretion, as we understand it, for most offences, to say, we'll suit the fine to the level of your income. In this system, actually, normally what magistrates do if you're unemployed is give you a much lower fine. So you could, if you move to a decriminalised system, you could end up with a worse outcome for poor households and worse evasion for us. So it could be a lose-lose. We're just saying, let's not do it next week. Let's look at it properly in Charter.
Isn't there a simpler way of dealing with this, which is to move to a system of subscription whereby you would be able to stop people consuming content or consuming BBC services if they hadn't paid for them? Isn't that just the simple thing to do?
We don't think that would be simple at all. There's 40 million Freeview sets out there. You'd have to visit all of those. You'd have to put conditional access systems on them, give them subscription cards.
In other words, a device to sort of register that they had paid before they got the service.
Yeah, so that would cost £500 million. And we think that the overall system would be more expensive to run than the licence fee system. So we think that would be significantly worse than the current system.
But in principle, I mean, OK, let's accept for argument's sake that it's very difficult to do for the broad mass of viewing. What about for new services that the BBC offers? Why should subscription not be an option, let's say, for some of the iPlayer services, which by definition don't have the same conditional access problem?
Because we believe that people actually get better, cheaper programmes by all pooling their investment. We can watch the same programme at the same time. We can't eat the same cake at the same time. Because we can all watch the same programmes at the same time, the best way of funding it has been to have us all paying the licence fee. And that means that for the cost of a national newspaper, you get not just a news service, you get a global news service, you get all the television channels, you get the iPlayer, you get all the radio services and the local radio services. So you actually get much...
But why compulsion? That's what I don't get. I mean, the BBC often says, and it appears to be true, the BBC services are well tolerated and broadly quite well liked. The Director General produced some research the other week where he said that it appeared that people would be prepared to pay substantially more than they do now. Some people would, as much as £240 a year rather than £145.50. You continually point out that compared to Sky's £550 or £570 or whatever it is per year, it's extraordinarily good value. Why not put your money where your mouth is, as it were, and say, OK, if it's that good, put it out there, let people pay for it if they want it, and not if they don't?
Well, what policy goal would that meet? You'd have people paying more and getting less. and you would have a situation in which the whole principle of the BBC, which is that everybody shares in this kind of national conversation, gets access to the best finals of sports events, gets access to the best arts and theatre, as well as all the other wonderful stuff that they get from Sky, from ITV, from all the other players. You would lose all of that. And actually, I would start from the point of view of it isn't broken in the UK. We've got one of the best TV and radio markets in the world. That's to do a lot with our competitors, but it's also to do with the BBC and the fact that we have a sort of competition for quality.
You say that, but you say it's not broken. On the other hand, just last week you say of BBC Three, right? That's it. The licence fee has been rendered insufficient by government action. They've frozen it. They've taken significant portions of the licence fee, or significant amounts out of the licence fee to pay for S4C, World Service, broadband rollout, local TV, things that the government have decided to do. And as a result, there's not enough money, you now say, to pay for all the services the BBC runs. Well, in that sense, if it appears to be showing signs of being broken, insofar as there's not enough money to do what the BBC feels it needs to do. Isn't there an argument, at the very least, for considering subscription at least as additional funding at the margins, maybe, of what the BBC does?
No, I think you would then get...
Have you modelled any of that?
Yeah, and there's two problems. One is you get into first and second class licence fee payers. You'd be taking stuff away from people that they value. They'd be paying more and getting less. But the other problem is that if you actually go and look at it, what services could you actually exclude people from?
You could charge for the iPlayer.
Say you went to the children's channels or to BBC4, BBC3, you'd only be reducing the licence fee by £10 or £20. And what you'd be doing is taking people away from the opportunity of coming across that amazing documentary that changes their life, or that amazing child's programme.
So supposing you keep all the TV services, the broadcast services, free at the point of use, free
and
to
all the
air,
radio
whatever,
services.
And the radio services, and that's what you pay the licence fee for. If you want on-demand services, then you pay for them.
Yeah, because the whole point of the...
Easily done, technically possible, and, by the way...
But not good. What desirable...
hold on.
You wouldn't have any... The licence fee wouldn't be any cheaper. It would be a marginal cost. And the whole way that the BBC...
Hold on.
Let me just answer your question,
insofar as people are beginning to use on-demand services and value them and pay, why not pay for them? That would begin to solve your problem, wouldn't it?
Why would you freeze the BBC in an old technological ghetto? I mean, it wouldn't be... when the whole way that we've looked at this over the last 10 or 20 years is to go, we're not a TV company, we're a company that's here, a corporation that's here to inform, educate and entertain. And if an exciting new way comes along of doing that, like the iPlayer or News Online, then we should do it. By doing that, we've actually helped to grow the market overall. Okay, when you go back and ask people why they got the internet the first time, 1 in 10 say it was because of BBC News. When you ask people why they did it for broadband, 1 in 10 said it was for the iPlayer. So you grow an overall market.
You could have made the same argument when TV went from black and white to colour. And what the BBC did in that case... hold on. What the BBC did in that case was say, OK, we'll have a different licence fee, a higher licence fee, for which you get colour. So the old black and white licence fee was frozen or whatever it was. You pay substantially more for colour. Yeah. Well, what about having a licence fee and maybe a licence fee plus digital licence fee?
As you know, Steve, that was looked at last time round, and by the Gavin Davis Commission in the 90s. It was rejected for two reasons. One, people didn't want that first and second class licence fee payer, and secondly, we didn't want to create a disincentive to people going online and going digital.
But your licence fee is currently frozen. Yeah. There's every reason to believe that the government will stick to that when it comes to it, and indeed, on current evidence, they'll try and dip the licence fee for something else that they want. The financial pressure is not going to give up on the BBC. Surely it must be time to begin to model new sources of additional finance that can begin to relieve the burden. Otherwise, it's not my argument that's putting the BBC in a bad place, it's yours.
No, I'm saying that the idea of moving to a subscription system would be a fundamental change to the BBC. But to answer the rest of your question, of course we want to maximise our commercial revenues. That's exactly what we're doing by growing BBC Worldwide's investment in the BBC, the commercial part of the BBC. They now put roughly £200 million into programmes every year. That's money that's saved on the licence fee. So yes, we want to increase our commercial revenues, but we don't think that this is the time to be changing the fundamental nature of the BBC by moving to a subscription model. We think that would mean worse, more expensive programmes for people than they have now.
So briefly, if you can, when you go into the next licence fee negotiation, will you be asking for the licence fee to stand still, to be increased with inflation or by some other measure, or supplemented by new forms of revenue?
We're a long way from having that conversation. We recognise that at a time of austerity, that the licence fee has been frozen, and that's helping people with their bills. We're living within our means. Actually, the licence fee has not gone up in terms of inflation in the last 20 years, and yet we're delivering people 4 times more TV services and twice as many radio services as we did 20 years ago. So we think we're providing people with very good value. We will come to what the proposals in the next charter should be in due course.
OK. James Purnell, many thanks indeed.
Thanks, Steve.